your word actually means something, and
Yes.
that's part of consent.
I'm all about the spirit of the law.
I think that we have had many instances of treason in our government for decades. Welcome to the Young Patriots. I'm your host, Devin Romero, and we're here with our co-host, Ada MacArthur, and our guest, which is Squid Alton.
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking I pronounced that wrong for a second there. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you've come from and what your life's looked like for the last couple of years.
Sure. Yeah. I was born in Texas and raised. I've been into politics for around 15 years now. I started with talk radio with my dad in the car. I
That's
was
incredible.
Sick.
So I was around my parents all the time. So like listening to Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, those voices are just so old to me.
Mm-hmm. And
because my dad was passionate about politics, and I mean, even going back to the 2008 election, I remember so many different things that happened during the 2008 election.
Mm-hmm.
It just really motivated me to care about politics. And then the 2012 election happened, and I started to realize that this isn't going to go away. American politics is like a forever thing. And then the 2016 election occurred. And you have the midterms, 2014. Nobody really cares about that. But the 2016 election occurred, and I was a really huge Ted Cruz fan.
Me
being
too.
from Texas. Oh, I'm not anymore. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Being from Texas and just seeing him like have these good logical reasonings for his arguments.
Yeah.
I really promoted him. I talked to everybody I could about him. I tried to spread the word, vote for Cruz in the primaries. He lost to President Trump in the primaries, and then I was a never Trumper before that. And President Trump ended up winning the 2016 election. And around that time, that's when I really solidified my idea that legality, morality, laws, that's all like incredibly important. And it's something that we got to be mindful of. And if I have any power to change and motivate people to be responsible and considerate of that, especially when it comes to living with others, that I'm responsible and therefore I should do something about it.
That's awesome. Real quick, I just wanted to
yeah.
clarify too. So I was also very pro Ted Cruz back then. I know there's been some controversy with him recently.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that's all about. I do think it was a good thing that Trump ended up winning, but just wanted to clarify what I was saying there. But I was actually very vehemently for Ted Cruz and was sad when he didn't win.
Yeah, and my disappointment with Senator Cruz started right after he lost and right before President Trump won his first term. He, he was mocked. His wife was mocked. His children were mocked by President Trump during the election. And the entire time they were just bickering. They were opposed. They were opponents. And then almost overnight, Senator Cruz just starts promoting President Trump.
Well, and he was trying to be unifying and trying to say like, hey, we stand with the person that won.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
See,
I don't think that meant his principles died.
Yeah, but all I saw was a coward who either then or later sold out, because he does kind of fight for and argue for different things now than he did then. So I'm very much like, you know what, like your view on taxes, your view on foreign aid, your view on domestic gun regulation, drugs, it's changed. And then my politics have changed too, right? I'm a malleable, changing person. He is also. He can change. I'm not docking him for that. I'm docking him that he's changed, in my opinion, in an uncharacteristic way. Yeah. And I think it's more like acting. And I think it's wrong. I think any politician who acts for their job, for their role, is acting in bad faith and should not be in their position.
Yeah, I agree on that.
I like that.
So what we're going to talk about today, which I'm really excited for, is basically what is freedom? The age-old question. Yeah. Age-old question. And what governments help with freedom? What governments hinder freedom? What are the pros and cons of different forms of government? I'm really excited to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I could, if I might, start with a quotation from the Declaration of Independence.
Well, real quick, actually, I wanted to ask you, when you said you were in politics for 15 years, what do you mean by that?
That means that ever since I was like 10 years old, I've been reading books on American founding fathers, Abraham Lincoln, books by Glenn Beck and others. Yeah. About modern day, I read like half of Dinesh D'Souza's published library. I completely disagree with him now, though at the time I thought there was some value. I was incredibly well read for my age and for my group. And as time went on, I I drifted a little bit less from just like books that someone would write for some gain to more textbooks, and I took specific government classes. I even read some of, I don't know if you know, like Cleon Skousen.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I even read some
Naked
kind
Communist.
of LDS perspectives of American politics and American government.
Yep.
Listened to a ton of Ezra Taft Benson and his views on, American government. I was and am very familiar with American politics and its history. Would I say I'm on par with a faculty member at a university on history and American government? No.
Yeah.
Would I say I'm on par with probably a sophomore, junior, maybe even a senior history student? Yes, I would.
Makes sense. Perfect. Thanks for that answer. Just a quick plug as well. Cleon Skousen, The Naked Communist. If you want to understand what's going wrong with our world today, he wrote that back in the 50s, and the FBI literally were using it as their guide to defeat the Russians. So, very fascinating stuff. Look that book up. It's incredible. He just so happens to be a member of our church, too. So, don't let that dissuade you if you're not a member of our church. Yeah. But what were you going to say with the Constitution?
Yeah, I was going to quote the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They're endowed by their creators with certain rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That's going to be something like really focal to our whole conversation today. Deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. And whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it's the right and responsibility of the people to abolish such forms and to establish safeguards for their rights, right? Like that's pretty foundational, pretty central to the Declaration.
And wasn't it innovative? I'm not aware of a society that held that belief prior, that the government receives its power from the consent of the governed.
Well, the Magna Carta really was foundational for that, right?
That makes sense.
Some king in Britain had a lot of taxes and wars because he was spending too much. And it got to the point where the people just revolted, and you had, I'm not going to get too far into it, but you had basically classes, the clergy, the royalty, and the peasants. And the peasants were the only ones paying the government because that's what the peasants do in every government.
But even in that case, the government wasn't foundationally built upon that principle.
It wasn't originally built upon that principle, but through the revolt and the war, really,
that changed.
The king eventually compromised. He was like, I can't pay for my government without you.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? And they're like, Magna Carta, we get a vote on certain taxes and limits, and we get a vote on certain wars and countries that you want to go to war against.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the foundation of the parliamentary system, since it was lost from like an ancient Greece, ancient Rome time frame.
That's awesome.
As far as the European West goes, there's obviously politics of ancient Middle East and Asia that we don't talk too much about in the West.
Right. That's where I'm definitely not able to speak to, but awesome. So what were you wanting to bring up with that point?
Oh, with freedom in general, it's the right and responsibility of the people to reject governments that become tyrannical to those ends.
Right.
Meaning that they infringe upon those three main rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Could easily be translated from John Locke, right, to pursuit of property, the possession of, the security of. I think if you are going to have a government, it must be practical. And if you're going to have a government, it must be moral.
That makes sense.
And I do believe that to a certain point, those things are at odds.
Right now.
They contradict each other. Not just now.
I see what you're saying.
In all
the
of
principle.
human history. Yeah. So this line that I think is focal to the Declaration and to morality is that governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed.
Mm-hmm.
I think consent, I don't really think I need to explain that too much, but basically you sign a terms and conditions, you sign a waiver or agreement, you give your permission that somebody has the power to do something on your behalf.
Right.
Or something, more than that. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to governments, especially like modern governments where we have vast power through technology, electricity, whatever, we have vast power to get and receive and correct consent often. I think that a practical and effective and moral government would establish consistent consent from the people that are under the government. Mm-hmm. I was born and raised in Texas, which is in the United States of America. I have never signed a document saying I consent to the Constitution. I think that's wrong. Do you guys feel any different?
No, I think, well, for instance, not everything that takes place in our country is explicitly voted on. That's part and parcel with us having a Republican government, which everyone calls us a democracy. And I constantly am telling people we're not a democracy. Thank you very much. So that's kind of what happens in that system. I mean, for instance, we had 13, 18 founding fathers that signed the Constitution into law, and it wasn't the people of America that decided that the Constitution becomes the full force of law in our country.
Yeah.
However, I do believe that we have that vote right. I don't necessarily believe that the way we execute it right now is ideal, because what happens is you have conflicts where there's people that benefit from, because I don't work and I get a handout from the government, I want to vote for people that will perpetuate those types of systems. I think it encourages rot and immorality in our country. I am all for social programs. I think they should entirely be taken care of by community effort and churches. So that's where I stand on that. Is I think that there's problems where originally I think we actually had a really good system. If you're a property owner, you can vote. A lot of people think that's very exclusionary, and it is. I actually think that's exclusionary to a benefit, because if you have a stake in this land that you are voting for and voting against, and whatever those terms are and how it affects our country, you're going to take it a lot more seriously. When you have something at stake, something you had to work for, then you're going to do a lot more due diligence before you pass your vote on to the ballot, So I think in general, we have that ability to vote, or at least vote for the representatives that push policy, and the ability to retract those individuals if they do not perform properly. But I don't think that everything in our society inherently needs to be voted upon. And I think in those cases, like with the Constitution, it is sufficient for us to have the amendment process, because if we don't like something about the Constitution, it's very difficult to do, but you can work on getting an amendment passed. It's been done 27 times, technically the first 10 all at once, but it's been done. And so if that's something that you pursue and that enough people want, that's your route. Yeah.
Can I make a small historical correction?
Absolutely.
So you stated that 17, 18 men signed and ratified the Constitution.
I'm aware that was not the right number.
Well, that's not the point. I mean, that's not the right number, but that's not what I was going to say. They ratified the Constitution through the Constitutional Convention, where the state legislature sent men to create a constitution, which was originally to amend the Articles of Confederation. But
was it really though?
That was different states had different priorities. But then the Constitutional Convention ratified it. It was nearly unanimous, and they sent it back to the state legislatures to ratify it for themselves.
Oh, really?
Rhode Island almost didn't meet the deadline, but every other state ratified it. Every state legislature. And
I wasn't aware of that.
So the state legislatures, right, just like today, were voted on by the people in their state. Right. So it was voted on by several, 100 men, probably about 200.
Was it by representative government?
It was by representation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to clarify for everyone, that means that the citizens did not vote on it. It means that their state legislators did. So.
Yeah. Very nice. Anyway.
That's fascinating. Thank you for mentioning that.
No problem.
And by the way, I actually really appreciate that.
I forgot I remembered that. Then you said it wrong, and I was like, oh, that's not right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
To go back to the question you asked, I've actually never thought of that before. I think that's really something to think about how you never signed to agree to the Constitution. First off, would you?
I actually wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
I do believe it's an inspired document, but I don't believe that the current United States government is being run by the Constitution.
So that's not the Constitution's fault.
No, it's not the Constitution's fault, but
that's the government's fault today for being a bunch of hypocrites.
I mean, sure, but would you agree to go on a date knowing that you were intentionally being catfished? No, right? It might look like that's the person you're going on a date with. It might look like the Constitution is what governed our country, but in my opinion, in all reality, the Constitution is not what we're following.
Let's say
but that's like having a problem with the menu because of the person that's across the table from you.
I mean, it's still an issue.
You'd be voting on the menu, not the person that you're dating. So if the person you're dating is catfishing you,
mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that you have to detest the menu.
But why would I stay?
That's fair.
I think that if we somehow all of us citizens of the U.S. did vote on yes or no the Constitution, then that would show the government like, hey, it would remind them they know they should, but it would show them that there's a big uprising or still a big strong group of people that expect to be governed by the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, let's say we did put that into play where you have to sign yes or no to the Constitution. You can sign whatever you want. Those who sign no, deported.
They're no longer citizens. I would say that, right? If you don't agree to live by the rules of the government,
you don't get to live
then you lose
where the
citizenship.
government governs.
Yeah,
but that also poses a problem because then it incentivizes you falsely giving a positive. So instead of you saying, well, no, I don't believe in the Constitution, and then getting deported, if you want to stay in America, then all you have to do is falsely say yes. So it doesn't actually hold any force at that point.
Can I correct you a little bit? Immigrants who come here and take the oath of citizenship, they already have to take an oath saying that they support the Constitution.
I'm fine with that. That's what I'm fine with.
But why do they have to take an oath saying that they support the Constitution, but you and I don't?
Oh, no, right there, I agree with you. I think born citizens, should have to pass a citizenship test.
I think so,
and
too.
I think that they should actually take an oath to defend and uphold the Constitution. Now, people violate that oath all the time.
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at. Is I'm like, if you ask someone, do you support the Constitution? You say yes, and then that's the only reason you don't get deported. That doesn't produce anything productive.
Right.
But I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I do like that point as well, though. I think everyone, just because you're born into the country doesn't mean you get the knowledge of the country.
Oh my gosh.
You should learn about it.
We see that right now, what has happened because we don't have that system in place. I think that's a brilliant idea.
So it sounds like we're agreeing on two things. One is your word actually means something, and that's part of consent, right? You have to give your word, you have to agree to something and stick to it.
Yeah.
Right? But it also shows us that currently there are people who are not eligible in how we have felt, how we believe.
Yes.
They are not eligible for the benefits, their citizenship, for the perks that they're getting by being here in America.
I agree.
100%.
Yeah, I agree.
There are people who immigrate here, do it the right way, and they are much better citizens, I should say, than half the people in our nation that are born here.
I can already hear the leftists like screaming at us for saying this stuff.
Well,
and you're not necessarily right wing.
No, and I'd love to get to labels in a second, but I want to say we also agree on a third thing, which is our current United States government isn't acting in the way that the majority of Americans would like them to act.
Absolutely. Nor is it acting 100%, probably not even 75%, in accordance with the Constitution.
Yeah. So this leads me to the conclusion that, and to my knowledge, we haven't had a single court case in the entire United States history on this. But that leads me to the conclusion that if a certain person has become an immigrant here, right? If they've immigrated here, they've taken the oath of citizenship, or they're an elected official who has taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution, and they violate that oath, we should prosecute and take away some of those perks, even if that includes citizenship.
I agree that. I think that should have been established 250 years ago. Because that is going to be so hard to do nowadays with corrupt judges, with corrupt Congress looking at you, with corrupt executive, legislative, and the other one, judicial branch.
Yeah.
Everything's just so blown to pieces. I mean, it would be so hard.
Can I ask you, what do you mean corrupt? What's your definition of corrupt?
Corrupt, not following the Constitution.
Okay, so you admit that they're not following the Constitution.
Oh, absolutely not.
So then what are we doing? If we're not following the Constitution, that means nearly every act is unconstitutional. Nearly every law, nearly every judicial decision.
Not necessarily that, but yes, a large amount of the legislation. I mean, just the fact that the Senate literally was like, oh yeah, we're going to hand over the ability to legislate to the executive branch via OSHA, via all these other 4-letter, 3-letter organizations that they're just able to dictate law automatically through the Chevron Act. Like, that's insane.
So we agree that the executive making legislative acts unconstitutional.
Absolutely.
Sure. And the Constitution says plainly it's a supreme law of the land, right? Nothing supersedes that.
Right.
And both the last article, I think it's Article 6, and the 10th Amendment in the Constitution states very clearly, if it's not in the Constitution, then the federal government doesn't have the power here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So like
thank you.
So we need a bigger following.
And this is my founding for what President Trump just did in Venezuela was unconstitutional. He doesn't have constitutionally, he doesn't have the power to go and kidnap foreign leaders and bring them back to the States.
Hey, I hear that.
Like there's a thing called extradition. I'm sure you guys are aware of it. We have extradition for a reason. If we're good standing with, we'll take Britain, for example. if we're in good standing with Britain and somebody from America flees the United States and goes to Britain, and we realize that happened, we can just call up the UK and we can just be like, hey, do you mind finding this person, taking them? And if you do arrest them, or hey, you arrested him, great. Can you ship him to us? We'll pay for the shipping, right? And we charge him and put him in prison here. That's extradition. Allegedly, President Maduro is indicted in New York on some gun charge, I think, in drug trafficking. Yeah.
Those are few.
If we don't have an extradition agreement with Venezuela, then we should probably stop having good relationships with Venezuela. Let them do their own thing. If they want to all, if they all want to die because they can't leave or they don't want to fight back, that's on them. I feel sorry for the tragic loss of human life, but me right now in the United States of America, I have bigger problems. That's not my responsibility.
That is so fair. I really empathize with that message.
I do too. I'm all about that kind of mentality as well. And we'll probably talk about it more, but the thing about the whole Trump and capturing Maduro, there's so much gray area. There's no specific thing in the Constitution that says yay or nay. Congress needs to be involved in war. This wasn't an act of war. Big old thing, but essentially what he was doing was protecting our part of the globe. We know that China and was it Russia and Iraq or somebody was connected to the oil coming from Venezuela?
I think Iran.
I think China and Iran, because Iran's anti-Israel and Venezuela is anti-Israel. And
one of them, yeah. So Trump's playing chess, essentially. He's watching a few steps ahead, and I think that's a huge reason why he did what he did. Is it constitutional? That's the arguments. I think he was doing it with good intentions to protect our nation. And if other nations around us get protected as well, then that's just icing on the cake.
I want to see what you have to say, and then I have a question.
Yeah, I have a clause from the Constitution because you stated sometimes the Constitution says yes or no.
I was looking through it. I didn't see anything. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
That's right. Okay, so Article 1 is all on the Congress. Mm-hmm. Section 8, specifically their duties and responsibilities, and Clause 11. It states to declare war, right? Again, this is all the legislative has the power to.
Executive?
No, the legislative.
To declare war?
To declare war is a legislative act. Yeah. To declare war, to grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water.
So they make the laws regarding what you do internationally.
And as of my understanding right now, the Congress has given, because of 9/11, that was the most recent one, they gave President Bush special powers. And it's kind of stayed with the executive ever since, but special powers on specifics when it comes to warfare, fighting back terrorism, that kind of stuff. But to my knowledge, it doesn't say anything about capturing foreign leaders, trying to capture them because they're indicted for a crime in the U.S. None of that's there. So I'm right there. I'm like, you know what? Congress hasn't made a rule, to my knowledge, stating that President Trump could capture a foreign leader or even a foreign citizen.
And this is currently the issue with tariffs, by the way. It is not the president's role via the Constitution for a president to issue tariffs. That is actually a legislative issue. However, the legislative branch has surrendered that, and I don't know if that makes it constitutional because they said, okay, we don't want to do it.
Well, I don't know. If the legislative isn't doing what they've been told to do, if they're letting...
They're shirking duty.
It's all a check and balance system, right?
Yep.
The executive is supposed to check and balance Congress.
I agree.
And the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is supposed to check and balance both the executive and the legislative.
Yep.
Right? So if the legislative isn't doing their check and balances, if the executive isn't doing their check and balances, and if the Supreme Court is sitting quiet this whole time, I've got to be able to say strongly, either we're being ruled tyrannically intentionally or we're being ruled negligently. Yeah. And I somehow don't think it's negligent.
Well, and that's absolutely the case, is that, yes, there have been things that Trump's done that, at least on the surface, are unconstitutional. Maybe there's some legal, nuance that I don't understand, but I think the tariff situation is a prime example. I don't think what he did was bad. I think it's been really important for us to secure our nation because he's been using these tariffs to negotiate. It hasn't even been about the revenue they've been generating. I think that's just a way he explains it to people that don't understand what's really going on. But these tariffs have gotten us deals that are going to help us to not only break up, we're bunker busting the alliances of our enemies by doing all these things. And Venezuela is part of that.
And he's talked about Greenland. He's talked about Mexico.
Right. Those are key elements of that plan. And people are not understanding and seeing the bigger picture. And so I think that's part of why he's wording things the way he is. But by definition, some of those things are unconstitutional. So that's where my question is going to go to. And this is a question I'm trying to figure out my answer to. Mm-hmm. If something is unconstitutional and it protects our country from being destroyed, from being attacked, from having to go into war, is that something that's advisable? Is that something that is, especially when you're looking at a system, and think about it like this way, like you see in movies, you've got, oh, well, they're the crooks. And they're like, well, we're the good guys, but sometimes you have to play dirty in order to beat dirty.
Yeah.
You're like, when you do that, I'm the type of person that I don't like that mentality, because then you become the enemy. Mm-hmm. You've now become what you're trying to destroy, and it destroys you. What's the balance? Do you think that if it violates the Constitution, you can't do it, and if you're going to get attacked because of that, well, that's just how the cookie crumbles? Or are you in line with sometimes there's a circumstance where it necessitates that we have to violate the Constitution? Mm-hmm. Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so I would translate what you proposed as succinctly as the ends justify the means,
right? Or
do the ends justify the means?
Right.
And I'd say no, the ends don't justify the means. From the very beginning, I said a government should be both practical and moral. If it's not practical, it's not going to last long. But if it prioritizes the morality over practicality, it won't last. Mm-hmm. And if it
could you give an example? I don't know if people understand at face value. What's the conflict of practicality versus morality?
Yeah, so a good example of prioritizing practicality over morality, and again, this is kind of universal systems of morality. I think the best example would be like murder, stealing, and consent. Mm-hmm. So prioritizing consent, because governments tend to, on a practical measure, safeguard against murder and stealing. But Machiavelli's the prince, right? He really believed in this tyrannical dictator role, that you could lie to your citizens, you could steal from your citizens if you needed for their safety. Because the number one priority when it came to your citizens and your government was your longevity, your safety, your security,
this
how long will you last.
This very issue we're talking about.
Yeah, so he prioritized practicality. He was like, whatever gets my country to live long is good. And that's what he prioritized. And that's probably fine. It was practical. It lasted a long time. Eventually, Italy became its own country. That's great. Maybe. I don't know. Nor do I really care. But when you, I can't think of an example where a government prioritized morality, because it's so uncommon for people who seek power, which is what government is, power. Mm-hmm. It's so uncommon for people to seek power who prioritize morality. Typically, if you're seeking power over other people, I don't think you're a moral person.
Yeah.
I agree. I think governments, I think of socialism right away. They say this is moral, and they know darn well it's not.
Yeah.
That's a pretty extreme example. I differ a little bit different than you on the question that you asked, Devin. I think I'm all about the spirit of the law. I love the Constitution. I support it, and I would sign the thing if we had the opportunity to. But I kind of see what Trump's trying to do in this specific instance, trying to protect America long term. And I'm all for that. I don't think he's turning into this horrible dictator like whatever his face is, Venezuela. What's his name?
Maduro,
whatever kind of dictator that Maduro is. But I think rules can be bent if they need to be. And I think that's the argument. Did they need to be bent in this situation? I'm uncomfortable that Trump was able to do that, and as you showed with our country's documents, you make a really good point, and it makes me question some things. At the end of the day, I still fully support what he did, and I think it's going to help us long term.
I think what he's just
it's
talking
a hard
about,
thing
right?
to argue.
Yeah. What he's talking about right there is exactly what we're discussing
with
this.
It's
practical,
not yes or no.
China is getting oil from Venezuela. We're capping that enough. We're not even using the oil. Or at least that's what they're saying is going to happen. We'll see.
If the gas prices, hey, I'd love $1 for.
Well, what they're saying is that we don't need the oil. We've got enough oil. We're going to get the oil that we have under our soil and barter with other countries. But all we needed to do is stop China from getting that oil.
Yeah.
This is uncharted territory, I feel like.
What is?
In regard, well, first off, we've never gone and captured a president of another country before that I can recall.
President in quotations.
They're saying
he's a dictator.
We've captured foreign leaders quite frequently in the Middle East.
Is that usually around the terror thing?
I mean, yeah, because like in so many countries in the Middle East, you have is the government the leader of the country, or is the terrorist cell the leader of the country, right? Between Afghanistan, and these are kind of speculations because the government says that it's
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the government's going to say whatever's in their best interest, but really you have these weird relationships. Very much right now, President Trump is saying the same thing about Mexico and the cartels. Is the president of Mexico in charge, or are the cartels in charge? And so if you say the terror cell's in charge, then because of, again, the 9/11 George Bush stuff, and again in the past with Bill Clinton and his terror stuff in the 90s, you have so much power to go in, like kidnap and shoot Osama bin Laden. Like,
well, that's what they're saying, is that this is riding on the precedent that's been set.
Exactly,
like
and they're not the same, right? A government leader is not the same as the leader of a terror cell. And if you want to believe or claim, and even if you have the evidence that the terror cell runs the country, that's still a different issue. Like you just got to go in carefully. And our president right now, I'm going to say he had probably several months of planning, but it seemed like overnight he didn't even give any options. He just went in, took the guy and his wife, and brought them here.
That's not true. They were in negotiation with Maduro. And what Maduro said, basically, he started mocking the country. I saw the video, and I'm trying to remember what he said exactly. The moment he did that, Trump said, okay, guys, he's not serious. We're going to go in and deal with this.
Is this the one that's going viral right now where he's like, venga por mí?
Yes.
That one?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. He's
like, come and get me.
Yeah, he said, come and get me. Try.
Coward.
And Trump he called Trump a coward.
And then
right
Trump,
there, see, Trump's just gonna go to court. He's like, "I'm sorry, Your Honor. He told me I could come and get him.
But
he said he wanted me to come in. I just had to oblige."
That he's a little bit emotional, right? And that's not a trait I want in a president.
I don't know about that. His first term, I would agree. I think he's been a very emotional president in his first term. But his second term, I think he's been very calm.
Can I think he's been. We've also only had 1 year of him in his second term. Right?
Well, yeah.
We only have 1 year President Trump so far.
But have you not noticed a difference in his countenance and how he's actually handling these things?
Can I be honest? I actually don't watch the news that often anymore. And it's partly because, one, I do believe that most of it's propaganda.
Yeah, I agree.
And two, I believe more than what's propaganda, it's dishonest. Yeah. And three, I think it's actually irrelevant. I think it's irrelevant what my country is doing, because whether we're Russia or whether we're China or whether we're Afghanistan or whether we're the United States of America, I think we have an unconstitutional government that is doing whatever they want. No one's stopping them. The last people to kind of stop them with the power to do so is the people, assuming that our elections are not rigged, right? Yeah. If you believe that they're rigged, then you can't. Well, you can't just say 2020 but not 2024 and not 2016.
Well, I can, because 2020 was rigged.
It was a little bit different if you look at
different.
The vote totals. Biden got like 5 million votes out of nowhere, more than Obama did. Yeah. Like that doesn't make sense. Yeah, they were utilizing mail-in ballots. So I think you could objectively say there was something different about 2020.
That's true.
But I agree. I think that there has been perpetuated scam going even before that. You're talking 2008, 2012. I'm talking. I don't know how long ago.
Yeah, I mean, there's claims that the 2000 election between Bush and Gore was rigged.
Right.
And we don't know.
When did it start?
And I was not there. I have not seen every voting machine. I haven't seen every ballot. I cannot for sure say one way or the other. Do I believe that the U.S. government and other governments that might have an influence, and other groups of people that might have an influence on the U.S. government might be like scamming or influencing the election process? Yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's very plausible and likely.
We just don't know the extent.
I don't know the extent, and I can't say definitively one way or the other. What I can say definitively is I don't believe the U.S. government is currently following the Constitution. And therefore, I think that's a bigger problem than elections.
So do you believe that we should... By the way, I want to clarify what I was just talking about. I'm asking you that question partly because I'm trying to figure out my opinions on these things, because it's really easy in that situation for you to compromise on your principles and be like, well, but we need to protect ourselves against China, so we're going to go in and take Maduro. But what if that's not constitutional? And I mean, I don't know anywhere where it's granted.
Can I ask, where's the... Again, 10th Amendment. If it's not granted, then they don't have it.
That's what I'm saying.
That's something that's ignored all the time now in Congress, right? And in the government. But I was going to ask, if you do believe even a little bit that what President Trump did with Venezuela, kidnapping the president and his wife and bringing them here, and I say kidnapping because under Title 18, U.S. Code 1201, President Trump fulfilled every like requirement for kidnapping, right?
That's
Seizure
fair.
of a person
That's fair.
without consent.
I'm cool with that.
I've said abducted.
Shipping overseas or over state lines, right, against his will. Like that's kidnapping. That's a felony right there.
Yeah.
Do I think President Trump's guilty of a felony? I think he's probably guilty of a few, but I think every president in the last 50 years is probably guilty of a felony.
That's probably fair.
We have so many laws. How do you even like know what?
I'm probably
I don't even
guilty
know
of
all
a
the
felony.
laws.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah, I want to be a lawyer. I'm never going to learn every single law
I
in the
nervously
US.
looked at the camera
in
when
the
I
US
said
government.
that. I have no idea. I swear.
You're gonna specify in a percentage of the law.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it's likely that the last couple of presidents have felonies one way or another. Should we prosecute them? I think we should, but I think we have bigger fish to fry. Like, why are our representatives not representing us well? Why aren't they following the Constitution well? That's my bigger issue.
Honestly, I agree with so much of what you've said.
Me too.
Because that's my concern. This is something Glenn Beck's brought up, and he says we have to hold to the Constitution, bar none. Like, if it's anything, if it is unconstitutional, you have to disband with it. Like, you have to stop. You have to detest that. And since he has said that, it's brought to my awareness how many instances where you are tempted to back down on that. And I'm still trying to figure out what I think, because that's the reason I was concerned the moment I found out that it happened. Was because I'm like, where in the Constitution do we have the power to do that? If anything, it's precedent from recent events. Precedent from the last 20 years.
Yeah, 20, 30 years.
It's not that long. I don't know what to do with that. That's in my opinion, that's a hot mess that's set in front of me, because I'm the type of person that I want to be like Constitution all the way, all the time. I was talking to someone recently. I asked if they wanted to be on the show, and they said they this isn't really their type of thing. But he was like, I think that the Constitution is so far gone that it's been weakened so much by the inaction and action of our government and our people that it's been so eroded. There's nothing to defend at this point. You would have to basically reboot, restart the whole thing, and like come out with a new constitution. And I'm like, there's so many problems with what I just heard in that short little bit of time. I see where he's coming from, is that in effect it's nothing. It doesn't exist anymore. In effect, they've pissed on it. And what do you do now? But this part of me is screaming out, the moment you violate it, the moment you back down, if you put something new in, no one's going to believe you.
Yeah.
You've not only rendered this Constitution of no effect, you have neutered all future potential to recover and salvage what we have. But what do we do? Because it's already on that timeline.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do we do at this point?
So I would say we're in a pretty similar position to the founding fathers in the 1750s, 60s, and 70s, when they were like, you know what? I loved the founding documents of Britain, and I believed in, to some extent, the divine right of kings, maybe. Or at least that the consistency and the tradition and the historicity is relevant and has some worth and value.
George Washington was one of those people.
I think a lot of people, today feel the same way about the Constitution that the founding fathers felt about the king. They're like, you know what, tradition, we have to maintain this. Our fathers, our grandfathers, they fought to defend this. There's something of value here. Either we have to have faith, or we can just believe in the fact that we're still alive and eating food as representation that it's worked and it's good for us. But it got to a point with the founding fathers where, you know, a tax on tea, a proposed tax on their wheels and stamps, that led to the Boston Tea Party, right?
A tax of 4%, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something to that range.
Which is crazy to think about the amount we're taxed now. Granted, they were saying taxation without representation was the problem. So they weren't being represented.
That was one problem. That wasn't the main problem. The main problem to them was that they were being taxed unfairly. It was unduly. That they were being taxed for their stamps, but not the people in Britain. That they were being taxed on their wheels, but not the people in Britain. That they were being taxed on their tea, right? Any paper product was taxed.
Yeah.
And so we're in a unique position where they chose to, or at least some of them, chose to commit an act of domestic terrorism. And they threw tea in the harbor, right?
Is it terrorism?
I mean, technically it wasn't like state sanctioned.
It's vandalism.
It's vandalism.
But would you count that as terrorism? Because I don't think they were trying part of the concept of terrorism, if I'm not mistaken, is doing acts that explicitly harm a person, and typically that's not just financial.
Well, can I add, within a month from the Boston Tea Party, they were visited by a tax collector, and then they tarred and feathered him.
That would
I would say that's at least the act of terrorism.
But the Tea Party itself,
I would argue the Tea Party was also terroristic, because if United States citizens broke into a military, or not even a military, if they just broke into like some military supply depot and they just threw everything in the street and burned it, I would say that's terrorism. But it is vandalism also, and they might be doing it for the right reasons. They might be thinking that the ends justify the means. I think they only do to a certain extent. I think they only do when you can no longer, in a safer way, change the system.
So then this might go into this. Basically, when they were telling England, no, turn the ships around. We don't want this to be a problem. And then they said, no, screw you. Here's your tea, and you have to bring it on to port. And they said, no. You're saying because England rendered them no other option, they were justified in committing private property damage.
Personally, I think so.
Okay. What separates that from Antifa?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I would probably say they're targets. If Antifa targets small businesses, I would say that's the wrong people to target. If they target federal buildings, that might be the more correct people to target. A better example that I think you might disagree with, but you might enjoy because it, I think, answers your question accurately, is Luigi and how he shot in the streets of New York the CEO of a healthcare insurance group, right? Due to the Affordable Care Act, due to whatever government law you want to say, currently all Americans are mandated to have their own health insurance. And if they're not, they don't get their tax back.
Which is unconstitutional.
Which is incredibly wrong. And as far as I understand it, it's not too unconstitutional, but it's fairly unconstitutional.
The only reason that it still exists is because the courts determine that it's just a tax, and Congress has the right to tax.
Well, okay, so that inherently makes it so that health insurance companies are part of the government because now they fulfill a government mandated law
by intent,
right? And so there was no way I don't think there's a way to change that law reasonably, right? No matter how many electors you change, no one's changing the law. No matter how many judges are appointed, no one's striking it down.
It's dumb.
No matter who the president is, no matter both parties saying that they're going to make it better or change it or repeal it, nobody does, right? No one's changing the system.
Well, we see that. Like the right doesn't like Obamacare, but they have no plan for what we're going to replace it with.
Yeah. So on that basis, I mean, as if it needs, that's assuming that it needs replacing. It really doesn't. We're doing fine 200 years without health insurance for everybody. Like mandated by law.
You're just saying we would abolish Obamacare instead.
I mean, yeah, like the Affordable Care.
That's kind of what I mean too. Is you have a new bill? I guess you could just say abolish Obamacare, but I'm saying like having a bill that essentially neuters it.
Yeah, that
revamps it to some degree. And there's also problems with, like, for instance, I think Social Security is terrible. First off, I'm paying into a system that I can't opt out of. Where this is on the lines of freedom. Holy cow. I can't opt out of it. It's a failed system and it's going to go bankrupt by the time I'm halfway through to retirement. So I'm not going to reap the rewards from this system. But the reason that I'm still paying into it and why I don't have a choice to opt out is because I have to pay for my grandparents' Social Security that are now using benefits right now because they've been paying for their entire lives.
Yeah.
And so now they can't screw them over. It's literally a giant pyramid scheme. That's all socialism is. And Social Security is a socialist program.
So you're saying that in some part the United States government is currently socialist?
Yes.
I would completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I have no problem saying that we're currently a socialist state.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like as a nation, that we are socialist?
Large amounts of our market.
Socialism is an ideology of economic system.
Right.
Right. So the government can look like however it wants, but the economy is regulated in a socialist
It's very socialist. We are probably closer to socialism than a lot of these European countries that people are saying, like Norway and Sweden. Let's be more like them. Okay, somewhat. I agree with you.
Move there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Let's move to the right more so.
A more recent term is late stage capitalism, and I think that's just because the critics of capitalism recognize that we're not capitalistic. but they don't want to admit that we're a failed socialist system. So they have to call us late stage capitalism.
I agree.
I don't think they're entirely wrong for that. I think all capitalist economies eventually lead to socialism, just like how I think every single government eventually leads to tyranny, and every single tyranny eventually leads to liberation, and every liberation leads to a new.
So government. It's just an inevitable cycle, and you're just going to have to purge.
I can understand that.
You're just going to have to purge the corruption at some point.
I mean, how historically naive and arrogant are we going to be when we have probably about 4,000 years of history recorded for us to read from and understand? And in all that thousands of years of history...
250
years?
I'm saying out of all that 4,000, this is the 250.
And out of all those thousands of years, we have countless countries and countless forms of government.
Yep.
And every single one of them failed or is failing.
Yep.
And we're going to say, oh no, the Constitution, that's going to last forever.
Yeah.
No, that's so arrogant and naive. Like, you can't confidently say this one system is going to last forever. The founders recognized that. That's why they made it so it was malleable, so that we could change it with amendments.
Okay, well, so real quick about what you talked about. We don't say the names. It's fine that you did. We don't say the names of these types of shooters because we don't want to bring attention to them.
I see. Okay.
You're fine. You didn't do anything wrong. But that shooter that shot the United Healthcare president, when you were talking about that, you were just explaining that is a similar situation, but were you saying that he was in his right to do that?
I would say so. Yeah.
I would vehemently disagree with that part.
I do think he ought to be charged with murder because under the laws of the land, he did go out and murder somebody, but he felt that it was moral. I'm assuming he felt that it was moral. From what I understand, he does believe it was right, and he hasn't made that more clear.
He has not made the educated homework that he would have needed to in order to come to that conclusion. He admits it. He admits it in his manifesto.
Does he? Okay.
He does. He literally says, I am not necessarily an expert on healthcare and all the ways that this should have gone, but I just know that I am frustrated with how the system is working.
Yeah.
That's basically all the statement was.
Well, if I might present a counterexample, if I was living in a U.S. territory and a general for the military in the United States just kind of took the military, moved them over in that territory, and took over our groceries, our home, took over my, Third Amendment where they can't break into my home unless there's a war going on and stay there. I don't think it would be wrong to go out and hurt that hypothetical general because he is doing something that I can't fight against reasonably any other way.
I think this is where we disagree.
In that scenario, if the way I'm understanding it is it's an unconstitutional scenario that you're presenting right now, right?
Yeah.
So then my Second Amendment rights give me the right to go and take care of that because the right to keep and bear arms won't be infringed, and I bear arms so that I can overthrow the government if I have to.
Before the Second Amendment, I would say your God-given right to freedom supersedes even the Constitution. You have a right, and by freedom, I'm not saying you get to do whatever you want. I'm saying you get to live peacefully,
you get to
life, liberty, and pursuit of property and happiness.
That's why we all chose to come down to earth, is to use our agency and be free agents to do what we will and have the consequences
under the Latter-day
come
Saint
with
perspective. Yeah,
right. I want to make a dividing line though. The difference between the French Revolution was that they were pissed off at all their leaders and they said off with their heads.
Nearly every revolution is like that, though.
But it ended with those revolutionaries losing their heads.
Yeah.
The intrigue and the suspicion, it's a self-destructive and I will say a demonic element. And I don't think that should be ratified and I don't think that should be supported.
But counterexample, the Revolutionary War.
That's very different.
How different was that?
Well, it's different in the fact that what we said was, hey, Europe, here's our breakup letter, England. Here's our breakup letter. We're not going to be for this. We gave all the justifications, all the reasons. It's like 107 different.
The French had their reasons.
They did, but did they? It's the documentation, it's the presentation, and it's the method. It is, here is all of our disputes. These are all the things we've talked to you for a long time. It says in there that people tend to not want to do this until it's unbearable.
Yeah.
And guess what? We're at that point, and once we're at that point, we are morally obligated to notify you and reject. And so they give the Declaration of Independence to England and to the king. The king reads it and says, this is mutiny. This is treason.
Yeah.
And so what does the king do? The king sends his army into America, into the colonies to attack, to take control, to arrest, to hang. And so when we're in that situation, we are in a situation where we are no longer aggressors. We're not aggressors, not no longer. We're not aggressors. We are defenders.
In Venezuela, we're aggressors, but I see what you mean.
No, yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about solely the revolution.
The Revolutionary War.
And so that's the difference. I think there's a stark difference between those two. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to go back to your Antifa comment.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating because I've been thinking about this. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between the Tea Party and Antifa? And you said their target.
Yeah.
So because that's what they were doing was they said, this is the tea from England that we told them we don't want.
That we can't afford.
That we can't afford.
Yeah.
Take it back. And the king said no. And so they had to do something about it, but they did it to the T. Mm-hmm. They didn't hurt the captain. They didn't hurt business owners.
They did it at night, so I do believe that there was some watchman, some sailor that was captured or tied down.
They tied him up,
but whatever. I'm not sure what injuries he sustained, if any.
Yes,
but they did do vandalism. They did, and at least to that sailor, terrorize. Right?
Yeah.
But yes, I understand what you mean. The targets do matter.
It was intentional. It was limited. And it was purposeful. Mm-hmm. It was not just to let out your rage and hurt people.
Yeah.
So that is a big difference. The other difference is, what are you seeking? What is your intent? So I think target and intent. And this is just, again, so much here that is new for me that I'm trying to explore, that I'm trying to determine what are my true decisions and feelings on this, not someone else's rhetoric. And that's really hard to sift through.
Yeah.
But the difference I'm coming to is exactly what you said. It's the target not hurting innocent people that did not wrong you. And it's not the small business owners. Mm-hmm. It's not, someone that's not related to the government that's the problem. And what is your intent? For Antifa, it's causing chaos. It's causing harm. It's being loud. It's letting out their rage. Whatever the thing is, bringing about communism. Yeah. Whatever it is, that's their intent. But for America, their intent was not a murderous intent. It was an intent of, I have a God-given right to worship as I please and to have the ability to defend myself and my family. And I want to propagate that. I want to defend that. I want to perpetuate that. And that's where all of their actions, and there were bad actors.
Yeah.
There were people that made, I would say, not allowed, immoral decisions, like the people that tarred and feathered.
May I counter?
Sure.
When you're done, at least, if you're not.
I'm pretty much done. Okay. I just am saying that's the difference. It's the spirit almost of how that went about. But that is very hard for me to grapple with because I do believe Antifa is evil, that they are doing terrible things, just as if it was a far right group if they were trying to terrorize and do stuff. Yeah. So I'm trying to figure out what's the difference. What's the right way to do something? I feel like
there's a pretty obvious difference between the two. Antifa is like the purge.
It's fair.
So yeah, I was
very much on the same line.
To the best of our knowledge, the Sons of Liberty were kind of the leaders and the organization that did the Boston Tea Party.
Samuel Adams and a couple others.
Yeah, and a couple others. And that was not the prevailing, because many of them did want to see King George dead, and they kind of wanted to take the rest of Britain with them.
I don't think that would have been good.
Well, maybe not, but they were the minority. They were not the prevailing ideology, right? The ideology,
Sons of Liberty were.
Yeah. But the ideology that ended up winning was, let's just separate. They're across the Atlantic. Let's just separate. Let's just secede.
Yeah.
Let's just declare independence. So I think with your criticism of Antifa, it's not completely unfair, but I feel like you're treating it like it's the majority voice of irrational people. And,
I don't mean majority.
And maybe it is, maybe it isn't, right? But it's akin to the Sons of Liberty. I don't believe it's going to be the prevailing voice, right? It's not going to be like, there's irrational people in every time period, in every war, in every place of the earth, right? I just think it's another, I don't know how big or how small, but I do think it's a minority compared to the rest of the United States.
Would you condemn what Antifa does in destroying private property?
Yeah, because they're hitting the wrong targets. If they started hitting the right targets, I'd probably praise them. But it also depends on how they did it and to what degree. Because 100 years ago, if somebody was like, the United States is a complete tyranny, I'm going to go to war and kill the president 100 years ago, I would probably say, yeah, I don't know. There's still some like chance you could save it politically through the system. Nowadays, I don't think you could save it through the system. I don't think there's a political solution. I think the only way out is some declaration or some war.
Wow.
And I might be wrong. And maybe, hopefully I'm wrong. But
I understand that's not you condoning anything. That's just like the only solution that you'd see that would actually be a solution.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I want everyone to know that's watching too that if that does ever come to it, I mean, just by the fact that we had a Revolutionary War and we had a Civil War, like it's something that happens, and some of them need to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think the Civil War, except for the fact that it was beneficial, that we settled the score on slavery. We said, this is not okay. So that part was good. But, you know, clearly just the fact that we had the Revolutionary War and what it has produced, that was good. It was good for us to fight for our liberty. So not all war is bad. But man, oh man, if that ever happens, I don't know if America's prepared for what they're going to have to go through, what they sacrifice to be involved in a war. I am okay and I am fine with the declaration. And I see that going as people that rise up and say, we declare that you have violated the Constitution. You have revoked your duty as a public servant because you have violated it and you are no longer fit for this role. I do not agree with people going in and shooting up. I do not agree with executions. I think if we ever see that happen, God have mercy on our country.
I don't agree with public executions.
It doesn't matter. What's the difference?
The
public is worse. Okay, here's the difference.
Yeah.
If you find that someone was guilty of treason and you take them to a court of law, not a
We're talking
tribunal.
about like executions just because of treason?
I don't know. I'm
Of,
clarifying.
Like, going against the Constitution?
I'm just clarifying that
you did
in the
bring
case.
up court of law, though. And like
If you-
French revolutions, they didn't have court of laws because the court of laws was also corrupt, right?
Well, and that is an issue. That is an issue. But you take them to a court of law and it is determined that they have committed treason. The penalty of treason is death. So in that case, that's different. When you have a legal verdict and they, get a jury of their peers and they've actually been given the verdict of guilty, there was the authority, the jury and the verdict, then you have a situation where, okay, they're guilty of treason. Yeah, execute them. Absolutely. At that point, I think that we have had many instances of treason in our government for decades that ought to have been treason verdict, and they were not. And I think those people have been let free. They have been set loose, and it has convinced other people that they can do the same thing and get away with it. And I think that's
I do
ask
think
a
that
question?
our courts are very corrupt as well.
That's what I don't know. What do you do at that point?
Right. I don't know. Because they would totally spin it and say, oh, this guy's treason because of A, B, and C that we made up.
Which is what happened to Trump.
Yeah.
The 37 felonies were a joke.
Absolute bullcrap.
As far as my understanding, they had evidence.
But no. So what happened was that there were, I can't remember if it was, I think it was it was factually incorrect how much money they listed on these checks. The 37 counts was the 37 instances on those documents where that amount or those amounts were listed.
Because they were 37 different instances of intent to deceive and fraud. Like, that's how any court would try anyone, right?
But here's the problem.
If I wrote you 2 different checks and they were both fraudulent, I'd be charged with 2 different counts of fraud.
Here's the problem. The judge gave them illegal advisement, the jury. He told them, you don't have to agree on what the felony is. That is absolutely protocol. So if you are charged with 5 felonies and half the jury says, I don't know on felony 1, felony 2, though, they all unanimously agree. Felony 3, there's 3 people that think he did it. That's how that process goes. He wouldn't be tried on all 5. But what they did was he said, you don't have to agree on which felonies he actually committed. If you believe that any of them are felonies, then you can say your guilty plea, and it will apply to across the board. That's the reason that he got charged with all 37, first off. That is illegal, that process. The fact that the judge advised the jury to do that is bias.
I'm not overly familiar with New York case law and New York requirements for judges. I would be prone to believe that it's illegal to do that, but I'm not familiar. I can't say.
It is illegal, and they didn't want to talk about it a lot, but that is one of the things that happened. The other thing is he never actually was charged with a crime. Like if you ask anyone, what's the crime that he committed? No one can tell you what he committed. All they say is, well, it was fraud, that he was paying a hooker to stay silent.
I believe it was campaign fraud.
Yes.
Because he used campaign money.
That's what they're saying, but that's not the crime that he was charged under.
Well, that would be campaign finance, like fraud.
So, at least to my knowledge.
I'd have to look more into it. I honestly didn't care because in my eyes, I was like, he's kind of already broken laws. Like, I don't see what this is going to do. I do think it was more for show. I think it turned out in his favor. Same with him allegedly getting shot in the ear. I think it made him look better.
Oh, yeah. I think his mug shot. Mm-hmm. And yes, what he did with
But, like, I didn't really care. Like, one way or another, either he was going to win or Kamala was going to win, and it didn't make a difference to me.
So, yeah. I forget the point I was trying to make with that issue. So,
sorry about that.
It was something that you had said.
Treason and death penalty and
rule of law and
right.
Courts
it can be a murky thing when you get into that, and that's why presidents have had immunity in the past. Is just because it's. Anyway, this stuff does get really difficult, but that's my stance. Is I do think there are people that they have committed treason, and I think they do deserve the death penalty. Yeah. And obviously, that needs to be proven in a court of law. It is not okay for us to have mob rule that determines that person's guilty, they should die.
Well, I'll push back on your treason claim. Constitution defines treason as make war or aid in the making of war against the United States.
There have been people that have absolutely done that.
That's the only thing that constitutes treason?
Yeah, under the Constitution. They might be a better definition later.
Make war or support a war?
Make war or aid in the war against the United States.
Basically, if you helped Russia to basically attack America, or you traded secrets with them, or like those types of things are treasonous.
Hunter Biden what now?
So
I guess he can't be charged with treason.
I was going to say, I think that there are very specific individuals that absolutely could be charged with that.
I think it's possible. I haven't seen the evidence, and I don't know. But in my opinion, they're all guilty of one thing for sure, and that's not actually representing us well, and not following the Constitution. So already their oath to support and defend it void, right?
So you're basically saying that the only way forward is to reset the whole system, and you're not necessarily saying that it has to be violent, but you're saying what do you do about how likely is it that we're going to ever recover the standard that the Constitution set? So yes, we have to. If we had to reset the Constitution, how do you obtain that level of integrity in a document going forward?
Well, I'll say this: consent, right? You have people who elect other people to go and draft and support and write a document that could replace the Constitution. You have that document prioritize the same founding principles of freedom that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence make clear. If you do that, even if it's a complete monarchy, even if it's a complete democracy, if you have the system of government properly and explicitly stated in a way that protects individual rights, then you have the same spirit of the Constitution, right? It doesn't matter with an oligarchy or whatever.
But do you think, my concern is that bad actors, which I think are prevalent today, you've got communists, you've got socialists, you've got people that they don't like America, they don't like what we stand for. They want universal health care. Gosh, that would
live in Canada.
That would ruin our country.
Maybe
it would. I mean, it's ruining Canada.
100%.
I'll just add, predictably, we already have like 10 things that are currently consistently ruining our country. Like,
what's one of the biggest complaints people have about our country is that medications and all these things are too expensive.
If I'm on fire and you pour gasoline on me, I'm pretty sure I was gonna die anyways. Like, I don't know if adding one more thing is gonna do anything.
I think socialism is the cancer that's rotting our country.
No, because gasoline is a liquid, so it'll put it out.
You're brilliant. You're right. Yeah,
that's the logic that these morons have.
So I guess I want to be very clear though, like what our path forward is on those things, because my concern is those bad actors affecting how the Constitution is renewed and restored. I have every fiber in my being desires I want to just restore it to the level that it is. And so my mind, I don't want to get rid of the document. Again, that's kind of what my analogy was in the beginning. Like, listen, honestly, I hate the person that's across the table from me. Like, you're really freaking ugly. You've been rude. You chew with your mouth open all this time. But this menu is great. If you weren't here, I'd probably really enjoy this menu. So maybe you should get the heck out of here. Like, that's kind of the concept I have.
Mm-hmm.
I think the document maybe needs some improvements. So let's pass some amendments. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to gut the system. I think we need to absolutely rip apart. Okay, so there's all these corpses all over here. We need to like thin the herd. We need to say you're removed from your position. You're so nonviolent, and that's obviously the courts have been getting in the way of some of that stuff. That's what Doge has been trying to do is like cut that program, cut that program. So but that's remember, my
Doge
vision.
Wasn't actually cutting any programs. They were just identifying programs that should be cut. It was up to Congress to.
They definitely thinned out the government a little
Well, no, he's right. They were watchdogs. They were basically just saying, because that's all they had authority to do, is that needs to get cut, that needs to get cut, that needs to get cut. And then they pass it on to the Congress, the legislature.
And some of them were.
What did Congress do? Yeah. Not enough.
And not a single person, to my knowledge, has been like accountable for either the fraud or the complete negligence.
That's what I hope changes with all this Somali stuff that's been coming out in Minnesota. And again, like Glenn Beck's been saying, it's not freaking about the Somalis. Because you throw some Somalis in jail, slap their wrist, and guess what? The people that allowed that to happen are still in power. That's the issue. So I guess what were you going to say after I...
Oh, I was just going to say, with your analogy of the menu and the ugly, person that eats with their mouth open on the other side of the table, not referring to anyone in particular, not you, obviously, it's the example.
Yeah.
They have equal rights to you, even if they're bad actors, even if they're like secretly someone who's a traitor and they seek to the destruction of America. On a fundamental, everyone's equal level, they have the same rights as you.
That's why I don't believe we can execute or kill just like willy-nilly.
Exactly, right. So there's some due process that has to be in place.
But continue.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can look it up. This is actually a really fun statistic. On average, about 3.8% of the population is all that you need to successfully lead a revolution. If you have 3.8% of the population, your chances of overturning either politically through the system or violently, it works.
Do you know how we know about that?
So we just need to gather all the rednecks.
Do you know how we know about that?
How?
Because we've been doing that in all these countries across the seas. I mean, that's
probably, honestly.
Not probably. It's the CIA. The CIA has been doing color revolution projects since like the 50s, like the mid to late 50s.
And we're just okay with the CIA still being a thing? The FBI?
The CIA needs to die. The organization needs to die. And they're one of the scariest people. Maybe the bankers are scarier than them. But I don't know. I'm talking like high banks. High banks.
We acknowledge
banks and CIA, they need to just fall apart. Yeah. The whole thing. And it won't. I think that's what happened to JFK, by the way. I will go down that conspiracy theory.
Do you think it was the CIA?
Well, what we found out with the JFK files was that the CIA knew where Oswald was for every day. They were tracking him. They knew he was Russian assets. They knew he was part of the USSR. And they allowed him to disappear. That's the only day they didn't know where he was the day he shot JFK. I don't think that was by accident. I don't necessarily think they were intentionally involved in it. I just think, what a happy little accident.
You can make the same proposition for many of the recent school shooters, right? They're on the FBI watch list. They're being tracked, and then suddenly they go shoot up a school. And that's incredibly unfortunate. But then the FBI comes out and they're like, yeah, we were watching them.
I agree.
Clearly not well enough.
I do think there is some intentional malevolence, at least to some degree. I don't know if it's every case. I think that might be a bit extreme to say that, but I think it's absolutely been happening. Mm-hmm. And that sounds really bonkers to say. I'm sad that that's even something that I consider, but I think that's what's going on. Is I think they want to encourage a revolution in our country, and I think we may fall into that trap, into the lion's den. I think it sounds good on paper, and then they'll encourage it. They'll get that 3.8% that they need, and I don't think we'll like the way it looks if it happens.
Maybe. Yeah. Can I say some things in closing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We've managed to talk a lot about the practicality of government, some rights and wrongs. We've managed to talk briefly on the morality of government. But essentially, I think there is a way for you to have a balanced practical and moral government system. that ensures consent across the board, that protects property and life and freedom and due process in the law and in the courts. I think it requires a citizenry, a population, a society that is observant and participating in their government system. Thomas Jefferson, I believe, is the one that said that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Yeah. But if men were demons or devils, no government would be enough. So we're clearly some quasi-angel devil that government seems to be helpful, but we recognize that people are fallible, and then we elect fallible people into office, and we cry when they do something wrong, and we're like, whose fault is that? And then we blame the Constitution, or we blame other people or the other party, when we really ought to be blaming ourselves, I think, for having a system that supports the election of fallible people. I think the best system might be an incredibly small communal government, something pastoral, kind of living in the woods alone. I don't think there's a system of government that's both practical and moral that can keep big cities like New York, LA, Dallas, Austin, Chicago safe, because it relies on dehumanization, negligence of their rights, and taking away their property.
You know what? That would be fascinating to explore in another episode, because that's mind-blowing to me. Like, if we could do something like that.
Maybe, yeah.
That'd be awesome. Well, this has been fascinating. This is like exactly like I crave these conversations. This scratched an itch. I really appreciate that.
This created an itch for me.
Yeah.
The wrong thing. Maybe.
No, I'm saying it's something to think about, so it's good. But
I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
It's very insightful. It's not very often we get to talk with someone that's as knowledgeable
who's
as you.
Intelligent.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Well, we've talked to intelligent people. It's about knowledgeability.
I agree. I was mostly referring to people I talked to outside of the podcast
people,
as a whole.
People that have not been on the podcast. Yeah.
Those of you who choose not to come on the podcast.
So he wasn't insulting past guests. That's
of course. No, I wasn't. We've had actually fantastic guests.
We have.
And the second you come on the show, you're fantastic too, and we're best friends. So. It's up to you.
At least he said it honestly. All right. Well, everyone, have a great night. Thanks for listening in on this. Please share your feedback and your comments. What do you think about what we were discussing? And what ideas do you have for how we could help heal our nation? It's clearly sick. So let's try to fix it, guys.